Commander Hyunwoo Kim pressed his coffee cup to his lips and took a slow sip, watching the ancient alien structures through the massive viewport of the survey vessel New Dawn. The ruins below looked like giant crystal flowers frozen in time, their surfaces glowing with soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. His archaeological team had been studying these mysterious structures for 3 weeks now, and each day brought new questions. "Sir, Dr. So Young just sent up another artifact," Lieutenant Sujin Park called from her communications station. "She says it's some kind of data storage device, but the energy readings are off the charts." Hyunwoo nodded, setting down his cup. The 50 ships of Archaeological Survey Group 7 floated in a loose formation around the planet, their hulls gleaming silver against the star field. Most were research vessels packed with sensors and laboratories, but 12 were designated as security escorts. Not that anyone expected trouble out here in the Rim territories. "Commander," called Ensign Minho from the sensor station, his voice suddenly tense. "I'm picking up multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace, big ones." The bridge fell silent, except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Hyunwoo moved to the tactical display, watching red dots materialize around their position. The alien ships were massive, easily twice the size of human vessels, with angular black hulls that seemed to absorb light. "Count?" Hyunwoo asked. 150 vessels, sir. They're taking attack formation." Lieutenant Sujin's console chirped urgently. "Sir, incoming transmission, audio only. Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was harsh and guttural, speaking heavily accented, standard. "Primitive humans, you have trespassed in Galactic Council space. I am Admiral Vextol of the Zephyrian Empire. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded, or you will be destroyed. You have 30 seconds to comply." Hyunwoo felt his stomach tighten, but his expression remained calm. 3 weeks of peaceful research, and now this. He caught the eye of his tactical officer, Major Jin-Ho Lee, who was already running his fingers over his weapon controls. "Response, sir?" Jin-Ho asked quietly, his voice steady despite the impossible odds. Around them, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency. No panic, no shouting, just professionals doing their jobs. This was why Hyunwoo loved serving with humans. When things got bad, they got better, not worse. "Standard first contact protocols," Hyunwoo replied calmly. "Defensive Formation Delta." Jin-Ho's eyebrows rose slightly. Formation Delta wasn't defensive at all, but he didn't question the order. "Aye, sir, all ships assume Formation Delta. Weapons free." The human fleet began to move. From the aliens' perspective, it must have looked like the humans were clustering, together in fear, their smaller escort ships pulling in tight around the research vessels. What the Zephyrians couldn't see was the quantum entanglement network, linking every human ship's targeting system, or the adaptive plasma cannons extending from concealed weapon bays. "Pathetic," Admiral Vextol's voice crackled through the comm. "You huddle like prey animals. This will be over quickly." The Zephyrian ships accelerated forward, their weapons charging with visible energy buildup. Hyunwoo watched the tactical display as enemy targeting locks painted his ships. 12 seconds until weapons range. "Sir," whispered Communications Officer Yejin Song, "should we try to negotiate?" "They called us primitive," Hyunwoo replied, softly. "And they threatened our archaeologists. Jin-Ho, you may fire when ready." What happened next lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. The human escort ships exploded outward from their defensive cluster like a flower blooming. In fast forward, their adaptive weapons synchronized through quantum links, each shot calculated by distributed AI to maximize damage, while the ships themselves moved in patterns that seemed to defy physics. The lead Zephyrian dreadnought, Admiral Vextol's flagship, took 17 plasma bolts simultaneously. Its shields collapsed in a cascade of sparks before the hull split open like an overripe fruit. Atmosphere vented in glittering clouds, while secondary explosions rippled along its length. Their shields operate on a rotating frequency, Major Jin-Ho reported calmly, while his weapons tore through another enemy formation. "Our plasma bolts are adapting in real time. They can't compensate fast enough." The human ships danced between enemy fire, their inertial dampeners allowing impossible turns and accelerations. Lieutenant Commander Haewon Park, piloting the escort, vessel Swift Current, corkscrewed through a formation of 6 enemy cruisers, her weapons firing in all directions. Each shot found its mark. On the New Dawn's bridge, Ensign Min Ho stared at his sensors in amazement. "Sir, their return fire is completely ineffective. Our hull plating is absorbing everything they throw at us." Hyunwoo nodded. Human metallurgy had advanced considerably in the past century. What looked like simple survey ships were actually built to survive anything short of a direct hit from a Stellar-class weapon. The battle, if it could be called that, ended when the surviving 30 Zephyrian ships suddenly broke formation and fled toward hyperspace. Their retreat was so sudden that several ships collided with each other in their panic to escape. As the last enemy vessel vanished into hyperspace, the bridge fell silent again. Hyunwoo looked around at his crew, all of whom seemed slightly stunned by what had just happened. "Damage report," he asked. "Minor hull scoring on 3 ships," Jinho replied. "No casualties." The research vessels never even raised their combat shields. Hyunwoo turned to his communications officer. "Send word to Colonial Command. Tell them we've made contact." He paused, then added, "And tell them it didn't go well. Agent Krill's." Six eyes blinked in disbelief as he stared at the holographic display floating above his workstation. The insectoid intelligence officer had been analyzing intercepted human communications for 12 hours straight, and what he found made his chitinous shell crawl with unease. "This cannot be accurate," he clicked to himself in the Zephyrian language, his mandibles chattering nervously. The translation matrix showed that the human fleet, which had obliterated Admiral Vextal's armada, was officially designated as Archaeological Survey Group 7 in their military databases. The security detail was listed as minimal escort protection for civilian research operations. Krill's compound eyes focused on different sections of the data stream simultaneously. His species had evolved to process multiple information sources at once, a trait that made them excellent intelligence gatherers. But right now, that ability was more curse than blessing. He pulled up the battle recordings again, watching the human ships move like synchronized swimmers through space. Their weapons had adapted to Zephyrian shield frequencies in real time, something that should have been impossible with primitive technology. Yet the humans classified these vessels as research escorts, not frontline warships. "Computer, search human military databases for fleet classifications," Krill commanded. The AI's response made his blood run cold. References began flooding his screens. 3rd Colonial Defense Fleet, 7th Home Guard Armada, Europa Station Battle Group, Titan, Fortress Command. Each designation suggested massive military formations that dwarfed what they had already encountered, but it was the final entry that made Krill's breathing apparatus wheeze with terror. Sul Retention Force. Even in the intercepted communications between human admirals, this unit was mentioned only in hushed tones, as if speaking its name too loudly might summon something terrible. One intercepted message particularly caught his attention. A conversation between 2 human commanders discussing acceptable loss ratios for colonial defense operations. They spoke casually about sacrificing entire fleets to buy time for civilian evacuations, as if expecting to be outnumbered was perfectly normal. "What kind of species plans for defeat so thoroughly?" Krill whispered, his translator struggling with the concept. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Mi Young-han sat in her office overlooking the Seoul Defense Complex, reviewing Commander Hyun-woo's first contact report on her holographic display. Through the massive windows behind her, the city sprawled endlessly toward the horizon, its towers reaching toward the stars, where humanity had spread across dozens of worlds. Hyun-woo's people handled it well, she told her aide, Captain Do-hyun Choi, who stood at attention beside her desk. Minimal casualties, quick resolution, and they followed first contact protocols to the letter. Do-hyun nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "The aliens showed no interest in communication, Admiral. They demanded immediate surrender and threatened to destroy civilian researchers." Mi Young's jaw tightened. In the 3 centuries since humanity had left Earth, they had always hoped to find peaceful neighbors among the stars. This first encounter suggested otherwise. "The Zephyrian Empire," she mused, reading through the intelligence summary. They seem to operate under the assumption that military superiority grants them authority over other species. Should we activate the Third Colonial Defense Fleet? Do-hyun asked. If they return with larger numbers. Mi-young considered this carefully. The colonial defense fleets were humanity's first line of protection for their outer settlements. Each fleet consisted of 200 state-of-the-art warships designed specifically for defending civilian populations against hostile forces. They were fast, heavily armed, and commanded by officers who had trained their entire careers for exactly this scenario. Not yet, she decided. Let's see how they respond to their losses first. Sometimes a bloody nose is enough to discourage. Bullies! Her personal communicator chimed with an incoming priority message. The hologram of Admiral Sung-min Park, commander of Lunar Station, materialized above her desk. Mi-young, I've been monitoring the Zephyrian response to yesterday's encounter, Sung-min reported. Their deep space communications are going crazy. They're mobilizing something called the Terminus Battle Group. Size estimate? Intelligence suggests around 500 heavy warships, their best and most advanced vessels. Do-hyun sucked in a sharp breath. That's 2.5 times larger than what Commander Hyunwoo faced. Mi-young leaned back in her chair, her fingers drumming against the armrest. 500 ships was a serious commitment of force. The Zephyrians weren't just seeking revenge. They were trying to make a statement about human capabilities. Where are they heading, she asked. New Geneva Colony, Sung-min replied grimly. Population 2 million civilians, mostly agricultural workers and their families. The implications hit everyone in the room immediately. The aliens weren't targeting military installations or industrial centers. They were going after farmers and families, likely assuming that humans would surrender rather than see civilians slaughtered. They were about to learn how wrong that assumption was. Activate the Third Colonial Defense Fleet, Mi-young ordered. Full combat deployment to New Geneva. And Sung-min, put Admiral Tae-min-yoon in command. If the Zephyrians want to escalate, they're about to discover what human escalation looks like. Should we alert the home fleet? Do-hyun asked again. Mi-young shook her head, though her expression had hardened considerably. Not yet. Let's see how serious they really are first. What she didn't tell her aide was that the Sol Retention Force had already been quietly notified. Deep in the asteroid belt beyond Mars, ancient weapons platforms were powering up their reactors for the first time in decades, just in case. VMI. Terminus Battle Group dropped out of hyperspace like a metallic storm, 500 of the Galactic Council's most advanced dreadnoughts materializing in perfect formation around New Geneva Colony. Each ship stretched over 2 kilometers in length, their black hulls bristling with weapon arrays that could crack planets. Admiral Zekthar stood on the bridge of his flagship Worldbreaker, watching the peaceful human colony spinning below. 2 million civilians tended vast agricultural domes that stretched across 3 continents, their lives about to become a lesson for the rest of humanity. Scan for human military presence, he commanded, his scaled hands gripping the command rail. Sensors detect 200 vessels in defensive orbit, his tactical officer reported. Small craft, likely civilian transports attempting to evacuate. Zekthar's reptilian features twisted into what passed for a smile among his species. The humans had learned nothing from their earlier encounter. They still believed their primitive technology could stand against Galactic Council superiority. Open communications to the human colony, he ordered. Time to end this charade. But before the transmission could connect, space around the Terminus Battle Group suddenly erupted with activity. The 200 civilian transports revealed their true nature as their hulls split open like flowers, weapon systems deploying from hidden compartments. Admiral Tae-min-yoon stood calmly on the bridge of his flagship Determination, watching. The alien formation through tactical displays that showed every enemy ship's exact position, weapon status and shield configuration. The Third Colonial Defense Fleet had been waiting in stealth mode for 6 hours, their advanced cloaking systems making them appear as harmless cargo vessels. 200 ships against 500, observed Commander Ye-jin Song from her tactical station, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. They really don't understand us, do they? Taemin's expression remained stone-faced, but his eyes held a cold fury that his crew recognized. The Admiral had grown up on a farming colony himself. The idea of aliens threatening innocent agricultural workers stirred something deep and primal in his warrior's heart. "All ships, this is Admiral Yoon," he broadcast across the fleet network. "Remember, we're not just protecting New Geneva. We're showing these aliens what happens when they threaten human civilians. Let's make sure they never forget this lesson." The human ships moved like a single organism, their quantum-entangled navigation systems allowing coordination that seemed almost telepathic. What the aliens had assumed would be a massacre became something else entirely. The first wave of human attack ships, sleek vessels called Raptor-class interceptors, streaked toward the alien formation at impossible speeds. Their hulls shimmered with adaptive camouflage that made targeting difficult, while their weapons fired concentrated plasma streams that could slice through most known materials. Lieutenant Commander Bora Kim piloted her interceptor Lightning Strike directly toward the enemy flagship, her ship's AI calculating attack vectors faster than biological minds could process. Enemy fire erupted around her, but the human vessel twisted through the barrage like it was performing a dance. "Target their command ship first," she radioed to her squadron. "Cut off the head and the body dies." Her plasma cannons found their mark, punching through the World Breaker's shields and carving deep gouges in its hull. Secondary explosions rippled along the massive vessel's flanks as critical systems overloaded. Meanwhile, the human capital ships revealed weapons that shouldn't have existed. The cruiser, Soul's Pride, deployed gravity cannons that warped space itself, creating invisible fists that crushed enemy vessels like tin cans. The destroyer, Mountain Wind, fired quantum torpedoes that phased through shields before detonating inside enemy hulls. "Impossible!" Zekthar gasped as his own ship shuddered under human fire. "Our intelligence said they were primitive." His tactical officer's voice cracked with panic. "Sir, their weapons are adapting to our defense frequencies in real time. Every shot is more effective than the last." The battle that followed defied everything the Galactic Council thought they knew about warfare. Human ships moved in three-dimensional formations that flowed like liquid, each vessel supporting the others, in patterns that maximized their firepower while minimizing their exposure to enemy weapons. Captain Minjun Park commanded the heavy cruiser Thunder Mountain, his ship's massive railguns firing depleted uranium slugs at significant fractions of light speed. Each shot punched completely through enemy dreadnoughts, the kinetic energy transfer turning massive warships into expanding clouds of debris. "Sir, enemy formation is collapsing," reported his weapons officer. "They're trying to retreat, but our interceptors have them boxed in." The Zephyrian ships found themselves trapped in a deadly sphere of human vessels. Every attempt to break out was met with concentrated fire that demolished their formation. Their own weapons, designed to overwhelm primitive defenses through sheer volume, proved useless against human ships that could predict and counter every attack pattern. Commander Yejin Song watched the tactical display with professional satisfaction. 18 minutes, she announced. That's how long it took to destroy 400 of their finest warships. Admiral Taemin observed the 100 surviving alien vessels limping toward hyperspace, their hulls scarred and smoking. Many trailed debris and atmosphere, clear signs of critical damage. They would carry word of this battle back to their leaders, and that word would be one of absolute terror. "Open a channel to the survivors," he ordered. When the connection established, Taemin's voice carried across space with calm authority. "Tell your leaders we were just protecting our farmers. You came here to slaughter civilians, and you found warriors instead. Don't make us bring the real military." The threat hung in space like a physical presence. The fleeing aliens knew they had just faced what humans considered a defensive fleet, ships designed to protect colonies rather than wage aggressive war. The implications of what humanity's actual military might look like filled their nightmares as they fled toward home. Below them, New Geneva's agricultural domes continued their peaceful rotation. 2 million farmers completely unaware of how close they had come to annihilation or how thoroughly their protectors had avenged the threat. The interrogation room, aboard the human cruiser, Soul's Pride, was surprisingly comfortable, more like a conference room than a prison cell. The dozen captured Galactic Council officers sat around a polished metal table, their various species creating a strange collection of scales, fur, and chitinous shells. Medical nanobots had already healed their injuries from the battle, though. Their pride remained thoroughly shattered. Admiral Seong-ho Park entered the room carrying a steaming cup of coffee and a data pad, his casual demeanor completely at odds with the terror radiating from his prisoners. He pulled up a chair and sat down like he was about to discuss the weather with old friends. "Gentlemen, ladies, and honored beings of various genders," he began politely, "I hope you're being treated well. Our medical staff says you're all in. Good health despite the rather violent end to your fleet." Commander Vexkala, the highest-ranking survivor from the Terminus battle group, leaned forward with her 4 arms trembling. Her species, the Thrakari, were known throughout the galaxy for their warrior culture, but right now she looked like a frightened child. "You destroyed 500 of our finest warships," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Our weapons barely scratched your hulls. How is this possible?" Seong-ho took a sip of his coffee and shrugged. "You attacked our archaeologists," he said simply, as if that explained everything. "Then you attacked our colonists. What did you expect?" The alien officers exchanged confused glances. In their experience, superior military force granted the right to demand submission from inferior species. The concept that humans might object to this arrangement seemed to genuinely puzzle them. "But we are the Galactic Council," protested General Zixtor, a reptilian being whose scales were still showing stress patterns. "We have maintained order in this galaxy for 10,000 years. Lesser species bow before our authority." "Lesser species?" Captain Hee-won Kim asked as she entered the room, carrying a holographic projector. "Is that how you see us?" The intelligence officer activated the device, filling the room with a 3-dimensional map of human space. Hundreds of star systems glowed with the soft blue light of human colonies, connected by trade routes and communication networks that spanned thousands of light years. "We've maintained colonial defense fleets for 3 centuries, Hye-won explained, highlighting various fleet positions on the map. Each one consists of 200 warships designed specifically to protect our civilian populations and buy time for evacuation if needed. The hologram zoomed in on individual fleet formations, showing the impressive arrays of human military hardware stationed throughout their territory. Ships that dwarfed anything the aliens had seen, weapons platforms built into asteroids, and defensive installations that could withstand planetary bombardment. Agent Krill, the insectoid intelligence officer who had been captured during the battle, suddenly understood the horrifying implications. His compound eyes focused on different sections of the display, while his mandibles chattered in distress. "Buy time from what?" he whispered, though part of him already knew the answer would destroy what remained of his sanity. Seong-ho's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "From our actual military," he replied matter-of-factly. "The home fleet, the sole defense grid, the retention force." He paused to take another sip of coffee. "Though honestly, we hoped we'd never need them." The room fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Captain Hye-won manipulated the holographic display, showing the aliens what human space really looked like when viewed through military sensors. "The colonial defense fleets are our first response," she explained clinically. "They're designed to protect civilians and hold the line until our main forces can mobilize. Think of them as our police, not our army." The display zoomed toward the Sol system, revealing defensive installations that made the captured officer's breathing apparatus wheeze with terror. Massive space stations bristled with weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. Artificial intelligence networks coordinated defenses across multiple light years. Canned deep in the asteroid belt, ancient weapons platforms slowly rotated like sleeping giants. "The home fleet hasn't been fully deployed in over 200 years, Seong-ho continued conversationally. "Most of our younger officers have never even seen it assembled. We prefer to handle problems with local security forces." Commander Vexkala stared at the holographic representation of human military might, her warrior's mind trying to process the sheer scale of what she was seeing. "Local security forces," she repeated numbly. "You consider the destruction of our finest battle group to be local security? Well, you did threaten our farmers," Captain Hye-won pointed out reasonably. What would you call it when someone threatens your food production? The truth hit the aliens like a physical blow, leaving them gasping and trembling in their chairs. For 3 weeks, they had been celebrating what they thought were devastating attacks against human military forces. They had mobilized their finest. Fleets deployed their most advanced weapons and thrown everything they had at what they assumed was humanity's main strength. Instead, they had been fighting the equivalent of mall security guards and neighborhood watch groups. The archaeological fleet that started this, General Zixtor said slowly. How would you classify it in your military structure? Graduate students with a security detail, Sheng Ho replied. The escort ships were basically armed campus police. Agent Krill's translator unit sparked as it tried to process the concept of a species so thoroughly prepared for war that their graduate students traveled with military escorts capable of destroying battle fleets. And the Third Colonial Defense, fleet that obliterated the Terminus battle group. Local police responding to a domestic disturbance, Captain Haiwan answered. Though admittedly it was a large domestic disturbance. The captured officers sat in stunned silence, their minds struggling to accept the reality of their situation. They had declared war on what they thought was a primitive species, only to discover they had been picking a fight with the galactic, equivalent of a sleeping dragon. So when you said don't make you bring the real military, Commander Vexkala said weakly. You were serious, Admiral Sheng Ho nodded gravely. Very serious. The home fleet alone has more firepower than everything your Galactic Council has ever built, combined. And that's just what we keep around Sol for defensive purposes. He leaned forward slightly, his casual demeanor never changing but somehow becoming infinitely more threatening. We really, truly, genuinely hope you'll choose peace, because if you force us to show you what human warfare actually looks like, there won't be enough left of your civilization to surrender. The first sign came from the deep space monitoring stations scattered throughout the galaxy. Ancient automated sensors, some older than entire civilizations, suddenly screamed warnings about gravitational distortions, unlike anything in their databases. Space itself was bending in ways that shouldn't be possible, as if reality was being folded like origami by invisible hands. On the Galactic Council's homeworld of Nexus Prime, Supreme Chancellor Veltrak was reviewing casualty reports from the New Geneva disaster when his aide burst into the chamber, all 4 of his arms trembling with panic. Chancellor, the long-range sensors are detecting massive hyperspace distortions approaching from human space, the aide gasped. The readings are off every scale we have. Veltrak's tentacles writhed with anxiety as he pulled up the sensor data on his holographic display. The numbers made no sense. Whatever was coming was so massive that it was actually affecting the gravitational fields of nearby stars. How many ships? He asked, though he dreaded the answer. We can't get an accurate count, sir. The formation is too large. Our computers estimate somewhere around 10,000 vessels. The number hit Veltrak like a physical blow. 10,000 ships was larger than the combined fleets of every member species in the Galactic Council. It was an armada capable of conquering entire galactic sectors. Then the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. The sight was beyond comprehension. 10,000 vessels emerged from the quantum foam in perfect formation, their arrangement so precise it looked like a single organism materializing in the void. At the center of the formation were dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything ever built, their hulls stretching for dozens of kilometers and bristling with weapons that could crack moons. Admiral Junseo Lee stood on the bridge of his flagship, Terra's Will, a vessel so massive that small cities could fit inside its hull. The command deck alone was larger than most starships, with hundreds of officers working at stations that controlled weapon systems capable of sterilizing entire star systems. Sir, we're receiving surrender offers from 17 different species, reported Commander So-Young Park from the communication station. They're all asking for mercy before we've even made contact. Junseo nodded grimly. The psychological effect of the home fleet's arrival was exactly what they had hoped for. Sometimes the best way to end a war was to make the enemy too terrified to continue fighting. Open a channel to the Galactic Council leadership, he ordered. The holographic image of Supreme Chancellor Veltrak appeared above the command deck, the alien leader visibly shaking as he tried to maintain his composure. Behind him, other council members could be seen arguing frantically, their various forms of panic creating a chaotic scene. "I am Admiral Junseo Lee of the Human Home Fleet," Junseo announced, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who held the power to reshape the galaxy. "You have attacked our people twice. We're here to discuss terms." Veltrak's translator unit struggled with the concept of discussing terms when faced with overwhelming force. In Galactic Council politics, superior military strength simply imposed its will. The idea that these humans wanted to negotiate rather than conquer was almost incomprehensible. "Admiral," Veltrak managed to say, "we acknowledge that we may have made errors in our approach to first contact. Perhaps we can find a peaceful resolution." Before Junseo could respond, another holographic projection materialized on the bridge. President Hairi Shin of the human colonial government appeared, her image being broadcast simultaneously to every major population center in Galactic Council space. "Honored leaders of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's collective will. "We come before you not as conquerors, but as neighbors seeking understanding." The alien leaders hung on her every word, hoping against hope that humanity might show mercy, despite their overwhelming military advantage. "The fleet you see before you represents less than 30% of Sol's total military capacity, President," Hairi continued, her tone remaining calm and reasonable. "The defense grid and retention force remain at Earth, just in case something more serious develops. We'd prefer peace." The implications of her words struck the Council like lightning. What they were looking at, this impossible armada that could conquer half the galaxy, was just a fraction of humanity's true military power. The defense grid she mentioned was larger still, and the mysterious retention force remained completely unknown. Supreme Chancellor Veltrak felt his species equivalent of a heart attack coming on. "What would you require for peace?" he asked weakly. "Respect," President Hairi replied simply. "Recognition of human sovereignty over our territory, an end to unprovoked attacks on our people, and perhaps some form of formal diplomatic relations, if you're interested." The Galactic Council's emergency session lasted exactly 47 minutes. Species that had spent millennia arguing over trade routes and territorial boundaries suddenly found themselves in complete agreement. The vote for unconditional surrender was unanimous. Within the hour, formal surrender documents were being transmitted across the galaxy. The Galactic Council officially recognized human sovereignty, established embassy exchanges, and agreed to a comprehensive peace treaty that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. As the home fleet began its return journey to Sol, Admiral Junseo made his final log entry of the campaign. "Today we learned our neighbors lack imagination. They saw our exploration fleets and thought they'd found our limit. They saw our colonial defenses and assumed they represented our full strength. They never considered that a species capable of crossing the galaxy in search of knowledge might have prepared for the neighbors they'd find along the way." He paused, looking out at the stars through the massive viewport of his flagship. "Perhaps this will teach them something valuable about humanity. We hope for peace, but we prepare for war. We extend our hand in friendship, but we keep the other on our sword. And most importantly, we never ever start fights, but we have become very, very good at finishing them." Deep in the Sol system, ancient weapons platforms powered down their reactors and returned to their patient vigil. The retention force settled back into its eternal watch over humanity's birth world, satisfied that its services would not be needed today. Peace had been achieved, not through conquest, but through the simple demonstration that conquest was always an option humanity preferred not to use. The end.